The data set that we're going to work with is called general practice prescribing data. So this data was released by the British National Health Service. So this data talks about the general practitioners prescribing the medicines in different counties of England, and then it contains something known as BNF code. So BNF is nothing known as something is a book called British National Formulary, and BNF codes. Is a 15-digit code which corresponds to a medicine and its side effects and belonging to uh, what type of diseases or what body part it is going to affect or gonna ail the body part. So that is what a BNF code represents. So here, this data set is given with BNF codes, and then there is something called as net ingredient cost, then actual cost. There are many parameters here. So net ingredient cost is nothing but the amount of money that is spent in preparing the medicine. I mean, just the cost for the medicine itself. So actual cost can is actually actual cost is contains net ingredient cost minus some discounts plus logistical cost. So it can be either greater than that or less than that. So that is NIC and ACT cost. So BNF code is a 15-digit code, and the 7-digit represents which chapter it belongs to. Which chapter, in the sense, it can belong to a central nervous system. In central nervous system, which section it belongs to, and in each section, which subsection. And after the subsection, there's something known as subsection. So these are that's how a 7-digit code is formed, and the rest 8 digits correspond to the medicine quantity and the dosages, which we are not going to concentrate. We're going to only concentrate on the first seven numbers of the BNF code, as you can see here. Yeah, you can see the first seven numbers of the BNF code. So this corresponds to different chemicals and different medicines in medicines present. So yeah, this is something known as practices.csv, which contains the address of the hospitals where it is present, address, the postal codes, and then it corresponds to there's a unique code, something known as practice code, which is present there. So which will be further used to map it into a different where the particular medicines were sold and which hospital, so that can be mapped for later. And I think I can show you the data here. So DF-Chem contains all the chemicals present in the medicines and medicine names and other stuff. So DF practice, so the practice data set contains which county it belongs to, which city, each address, the name of the hospital, and the unique practice code and the different postal codes of that hospital or a dispensary maybe. So we don't need particular things like address one, address two, and postal code. So we drop those, and then this is what we come up with a practice data set. And then we have something known as BNF data frame, wherein each chapter title, for example, gastrointestinal system is present, wherein you have chapter number, section number, subsection number, and subsection number. So this subsection number corresponds to the first 7 digits of the BNF code. So this is one of the key components that we're going to use to combine uh, the BNF codes into, combine it into a particular data frame. And here is DF code. So this corresponds to medicines, in the these corresponds to the medicines corresponding to its BNF codes out here. So here we're only going to take the first seven numbers, not the rest eight. So rest eight corresponds to a lot of descriptions about the medicine dosages and other stuff. This is known as Bradford. We extracted another hospital called Bradford DF. So hospitals present in Bradford County, for them, we've extracted each, corresponding NIC and actual cost for different medicines. And once we combine it, I mean, initially here, that is also present. So for a particular hospital, that is also a possible way of looking into data. And here is the combination of all chapter number, medicines, and everything. So that's here. So we've done some pre-processing of removing redundant values, dropping NAs, uh, dropping null values, and resetting index duplicates, all that. So all the pre-processing steps have been followed. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do some particular basic tests like, what is the probability distribution function, what is the cumulative distribution function for different attributes in the data set. For example, we have taken NIC and actual cost. So you can see the z-score. So z-score is nothing but the mean, the value minus mean divided by the standard deviation. So x minus mu divided by sigma. That's a z-score. It's a way of standardizing the values present in a data set. So that is done here, and I think it's around, but 70. I mean, sorry, yeah, it's around 2.3, it's 23 million data. So, I mean, like it look like this very cluttered. But this is how the z-scores look, and there are some outliers. So z-score doesn't handle all the outliers. But yeah, this is what z-score is, and there is PDF, so probability distribution function. So probability distribution looks very skewed to the tail end, as you can see it here. Probably, if you visualized it, at a particular range, we can see it as a normal function itself, but it is kind of skewed to the right. Then you have cumulative distribution function. So cumulative distribution function looks also skewed. So that's also a graph present here. Then what we're going to do is we're going to do some advanced analysis on these attributes, like whether they're Gaussian curves or not, whether they're normal, or how much normal are they, or are they, you know, close to being Gaussian curves. So there's something known as Shapiro test. So we performed the Shapiro test on this on NIC. NIC is net ingredient cost, and then we got the p-value. So if the p-value is greater than 0.05, there is a very with 95% confidence we can say that it is Gaussian. The curve is Gaussian. Uh, Other than that, else we can say it is probably not Gaussian. So based on the looking at the p-value, it is not greater than 0.05. So hence it is not Gaussian. And then we can do normal test also. So normal test is also used to find whether it is Gaussian or not. And we performed Gaussian, I mean, normal test on NIC, and once again we found out that with 95% confidence, we found out that it is not Gaussian. Then we did hypotheses testing. So as I said initially, NIC and actual cost are correlated, since actual cost will be NIC minus discounts plus logistical cost. So it's some linear combination of NIC. Uh, yeah, so to find out how our hypothesis test works, so we did a trial run on it. So we took NIC and actual cost, and we wanted to see whether the test will be able to predict whether it is independent or dependent, or are our theoretical assumption about NIC and ACT cost is real or not, will be we can find it here. So we did a hypothesis testing wherein we said that if the p-value is greater than 0.05, the two samples are independent, and if it is less than 0.05, it is dependent. So that's what we said, and we did the hypothesis test using Pearson hypothesis test. So we found out that the p-value is less than 0.05, and hence it's dependent. And also, case test is also used to say whether they are Gaussian or not, and that's also done here. And then there's something called as Pearson correlation coefficient. So Pearson, as I said initially, so NIC and actual cost should be dependent. So we proved that they're dependent using hypothesis testing. So we want to see whether Pearson correlation coefficient would also state that if Pearson correlation coefficient is equal to 1, then we can say that the two samples are dependent. I mean, the two features are dependent. And we found out that the Pearson correlation is 1 for NIC and ACT cost, and hence verifies the theoretical assumption and how the ACT cost is actually calculated according to the dataset. We also tried it on NIC and quantity to check there are no errors in our code, and you can see it is 0.284. So it is not dependent. Obviously, the quantity and NIC can never be dependent, right? And then there's a correlation matrix that we formed here for the different different aspects in the data, different columns in the data with respect to each other. As you can see, this blue box, I mean, this differently colored box, you can see NIC and ACT are kind of like in that white zone. It's pretty close to one, the correlation coefficient values. Uh, I mean, you can see it through the heat map present here. And so we thought quantity is there, and we've done some sorry the quantity and NIC also are kind of correlated, but not at a higher level, and then quantity and ACT are also correlated. So those are the few things that we thought. So we did plot some of the orders, for example, order versus a count plot of the orders over some period of time, and then this is for a particular hospital, the amount of quantity sold, for each particular day. So that's how it looks. And then we have for the order, we have a distribution plot. This is how it looks over a few periods of time in data. And yeah, this is also order through the for all the hospitals. This was particularly for Bradford district's hospitals. This is for all the hospitals present in Britain. So, I mean, this is a very small sample. So we just took 10 bins. So yeah. And then there's something called as QQ plot, so which is the probability plot. So we're trying to uh, get get a prediction, or we were trying to predict how the probability curve looks for the quantity for in the Bradford Hospital district. So this is how it looks. So the blue points refer to the original values, and the red point is the probabilistic function that is plotted. So that's how it looks. And yeah, there were many more graphs which we plotted. Yeah, for example, the chapter title versus the cost wise. So, which part of the body was actually having a very high cost. We could have seen it here. So if you see absorbent cottons were like really costly, alcohols and salines and stuff like this. So different types of medicine. Which kind of medication was costing the most? Costing. I mean, the distribution of the cost over the different medicines is shown here. And also, I had told you initially, ACT and NIC costs are correlated, so it's just a straight line. So if you just plot them, and then medicines prescribed with other drugs. So what are the distribution of the medicines that are prescribed along with the other drugs? So there are different drugs name present here. So since it's Jupyter Notebook, it isn't able to capture all of them. So, but yeah, this is over years time, over the month of May. For this 1 month's data, we've taken and shown it to you. And yeah, this is an interesting plot. So wherein we are looking into a particular county, for example, Yorkshire. So Yorkshire has different medicines sold in the whole county. So what are the distribution of the different medicines, and how much quantity is sold? So their mean, min, and max is shown. So based on that, we actually sorted the values and found out that which was sold the max and with the maximum amount, and maximum quantity is shown here. So like emollients are most sold in Cheshire. So mostly in England, emollients are sold by highly. So based on this, all the I mean the latest plot which we got, so the particular county, different medicines are sold in a particular month. So with different quantities. So we wanted to look at a time series data. So wherein we were gonna look into the amount of medicines sold over a year span through different weeks. Like for example, we took tropical corticosteroids, and then we took the time series data and we did some analysis, which will be shown further. After looking at the data set, we decided to proceed with another method based on the advanced analysis and the data analysis that we have performed on the data set. We thought we'll look at the sales of medicines in particular areas and we'll try to forecast it. For example, like during COVID-19, the amount of vaccines that may be given to India would be around what 100,000 samples. The government cannot divide the samples directly to all the 28, 29 states equally. So they cannot just randomly divide it. They have to come up with a plan so that they can forecast the amount of numbers that will be required in particular states, the amount of samples that are required, so that the spread can reduce. So similarly, what we have done is we took up the medicine tropical corticosteroids in the county London. So we watched the progress of the sales of the medicines over the year, uh, which is a weekly data. So this is how we have extracted the data. This is the code for processing that we have done until now. Yeah, here it is. So we've combined different data frames, and based on the processing, we were able to extract 52 values. That is over the year's time for each week, the amount of tropical corticosteroids sold in the county London. So for this data, now we're going to perform time series analysis to forecast the medicines in further weeks and months. So, so this is the data, and then now we converted the time series data into the particular format in week wise. As you can see it here. So this is the plot of this how the time series looks over the 52 week span of time. So now to do the time series analysis, uh, usually time series analysis, every algorithm looks for repetitions or looks for a cyclical way so that it repeats after some time, so the model can will be able to capture that. That's what the model tries to look into. So before that, we would like to look at whether the time series data is stationary or not. So stationary means the mean and the mean and the standard deviation should not change over time. I mean, it should almost be constant. So to check how whether it is stationary or not, we look into rolling mean and rolling standard deviation. So rolling mean actually is plotted here. So these two curves, so the red line and the black line, show the rolling mean and rolling standard deviations respectively. Since they are not parallel to the x-axis, we can say it is not completely stationary. So to make this time series data stationary, why we're trying to make the time series data stationary is because the model can be uh, easily able to capture the data. So that is the main goal of the every algorithm. First, it converts the data into a stationary time series and then tries to capture the nuances in the data. So to check whether they're stationary, we have two methods. So checking rolling mean and rolling standard deviation. So rolling mean and rolling standard deviation say that, I mean, it is not completely stationary. So there is another test called augmented Dickey-Fuller test. So based on the augmented Dickey-Fuller test, if the p-value is low and the critical values for if it is close to the critical values for 1%, 5%, and 10% confidence intervals, then we can say that this time series data is stationary. As you can see, the p-value is completely way off from the critical values, and hence we can say that it is not stationary at all. So we would try to convert this into a stationary time series. So to convert it to time series, there are techniques like taking the log values for all the time series data, and this is how it looks like. Taking log values and exponential decay, trying to do an exponential decay on the time series and time shifting. So these are the three methods that are generally used to convert the data and to convert the data to stationary. So as you can see, we taken the log values of the time series, and the log values of the time series are here, but it looks worse than the previous one, the rolling mean and the rolling standard deviation. As you can see in the ADF test also, the p-values are nowhere near the confidence intervals. Then we try to do exponential decay. So exponential decay, after doing exponential decay, I think the rolling mean and rolling standard deviation again failed to, capture say that it's not stationary at all. Then doing time shift on the time series also doesn't help us. As you can see, the p-values are nowhere close to the confidence intervals. So, based on these facts, we can come into a conclusion that without any pre-processing or any further processing itself, the initial value itself looks better. I mean, the initial time series is almost is nearly stationary, but no, we cannot do any more further processing to it. Now we are going to proceed to looking at ACF and PACF. So ACF is autocorrelation function and PACF is partial autocorrelation function. So the whole point of figuring out when it is stationary ACF and PACF, these are actually what we are actually trying to do is there's an algorithm called ARIMA. So ARIMA is autoregressive integrated moving average. Uh, so what Arima does is it does an auto regression on the. So Arima is split into three parts. AR is the auto regressive model, and then I is integrated, and MA is moving average. So, auto-regressive model is where we are trying to figure out a value in the current period of time is somehow related to its previous periods. So, that is what auto-regression does. And moving average model, it looks into a relationship between the current features of the current time period with the residuals in the previous time period. So looking at the errors and trying to capture the noise. So this is how they combine and form ARMA models are possible. But integrated separates it out because what I means it tries to find out it tries to convert a non-stationary time series into stationary by trying to take time shifts in the time series. As we saw, based on the manually trying to hypertune it, time shifts did not work on our data. So that parameter, something called D, which is the differences parameter, can be made zero. So number of differences that people take to convert it into a stationary one can be zero because it made it worse. So this is just manual hyperparameter tuning based on the data analysis we've shown here. So this is ACF autocorrelation function. So based on the value of ACF, people generally determine the p-value. The p-value is number of time lags in the time series, and using PACF, people try to find q value, that is for the window size of the moving average for the ARIMA model. So before we get into Arima, so these are the manual way of doing it. So, but that is very error prone. So, we will do it through an automatic way, like a semi-supervised way, to hyper tune the parameters. So before that, so there's a time series right now. For that, we thought, why not look into linear regression and how it performs. I mean, how the prediction curve is here. So after doing the linear regression, so the blue line corresponds to the actual value of the time series, and the red line is the predicted value. So it looks way off from the data. So it's nowhere near, it is not able to capture the nuances in the data. So now also the time series can be split into something called seasonal decompose. So since it's a the data duration is for an whole year, so during different seasons there may be different effects on the data. So that is also captured using an automatic method called seasonal decompose. So where you can see the trends. So trends are basically the way the time series data is moving, whether it is increasing or decreasing, and based on that the plots are made. And these are seasonality. So seasonality is like repetition of the pattern. So it tries to look at seasonality, and there are residuals. So residuals are the ones that are captured usually by moving averages, and seasonality will be used in something called S-ARIMA, seasonal ARIMA. So that is it, right? So now coming to ARIMA. So since it is as you look at the graph here, we feel there is some seasonal pattern there. We can look, we can take, there's an automatic method known as auto ARIMA. So where we can define the initial parameters for P, Q, and D, where P is the number of time lags for auto regression, and Q is the moving window size for the moving averages, and D is the number of differences that we take to convert the data into convert the time series data into stationary and non-stationary time series data into stationary. So based on that, the auto ARIMA performs, it's like a grid search wherein it looks at different hyperparameters and then uh, tries to get the optimal parameters for the model to fit on the data. So based on that, the auto ARIMA gives a prediction of S ARIMA X. So it is called seasonal ARIMA extensible. So these are few of the parameters. 100 is P, D, and Q, and these are capital P, capital D, capital Q, and this is M. So M is the time period. So uh, capital P and capital D and Q are for the seasonality of the ARIMA. So it is trying to capture that also. Just normal ARIMA wouldn't look at the cyclical changes there. So now here we're splitting the data set, the time series data set into training and testing. So the 70% of the data is training and the 30% of the data is testing. So it is not randomly assigned. So since it's a time series data, it should be sequential. So the first initial 70% is training and the rest 30% is testing. So we take seasonal ARIMA extensible on, we train the model on the training dataset, SRE Max, with the given hyperparameters that we got from Auto Arima. And then based on that, we have fit our model, and then here is the summary of the model with respect to this one. So here, the Auto Arima chooses the model based on two parameters called AIC and BIC. So AIC is something called as archaic information criterion, and BIC is called Bayesian information criterion. Basically, AIC and BIC are linear combinations of negative log likelihoods. So at the end it is a negative log likelihood, at the end it is some combination of negative log likelihood. So the goal would be to decrease the value of AIC and BIC over time. It would choose the model which has the least amount of AIC and BIC. So based on that, the model is trained on our training data, and now we were gonna, test it out on our testing set. So this is the prediction out here, the testing set and the prediction. So the blue line corresponds to the testing set, and red line corresponds to the prediction. So even though it didn't capture, maybe wrong in hyperparameter tuning, but it did capture some amount of non-linearity present in the data, and it is almost at It is looking at least the average of the whole data. So I mean, it is trying to hit the mean values there. So it is way better than the linear regression. And also you can see the RMSE, root mean squared error, and mean squared error, since it's a regression kind of curve. We thought of looking into LSTM approach, but since the amount of samples that we've got is only 52 and for it is over years time, there is a very high probability that the LSTM would overfit the data and then we wouldn't get any good results on testing set. So we avoided that and we have stuck here with ARIMA. So based on this conclusion, we can say that we've come up the data set. We took a data set that is not a competition data set. The data set is very we wanted to look into the data and understand its importance, and we wanted to come up with our own problem. There is no specified problem here. So in real life situations, as people know, people are not given problems directly or any specifications. So we have to come up with requirements based on the data given. And I think we came up with a problem of forecasting the medicines over, uh, over a year's data. And that's it. I think this is what we've got.